Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
And welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right.
I'm Marlene Cuellar.
And I'm Asana Keitano. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us on this Monday morning.
A rather wet one.
Yeah.
It's the 14th of March, and I'll be the first to go on record to say this seems very much as though it's unseasonal weather we're experiencing.
I know that downpour yesterday. I was expecting more flooding when I came out this morning, but it's not as bad. Just depends on how much more rain we get.
Mm-hmm. The thing about it, Marlene, is that we sat here a week ago and forecaster Francisca Wellington gave us the 7-day spread.
Yeah.
And this was very much part of what was shared with us last week, that we would be experiencing rains with the cold front. That should have been. I say should have been because we only got a few breeze and then all the rain that came with it.
I know. And the breeze wasn't that cool. So, of course, we all want to know how long it's going to last. While we all enjoy the rain a bit, it does make for a hassle moving around. And if you haven't stepped outside, it's pretty wet. So you do want to allocate some extra time if you have to commute, if you have to take the children to school. I imagine there's going to be quite a bit of a delay. So probably a good time to get up and get started.
Yeah.
Right? And we'll do the same over here, right? We'll get started with your morning updates so we can get into some news. And we're going to start off with some motivation to get your day started right. And that comes from dailyom.com, and it goes like this. There are many kinds of journals. Some people record their innermost thoughts and feelings daily. Others write a single poem or a few lines of an essay once a week, every few months, or simply whenever. The wonderful thing about journaling is that there are no rules or restrictions. To get your creative juices flowing, start a journal to record inspirational thoughts and ideas, or keep track of an artistic project. Don't let your preconceived notions of what a journal should be get in your way. Anything too formal or linear is up for grabs when flying with your creativity. Write with your non-dominant hand or write in a different direction. The important thing is not to worry about your artistic skill in creating the journal, but to focus instead on your own expression. Anything fresh will do to kickstart your creativity. Use different colored pens or pencils. Fill your pages with colorful doodles. Anything to keep you from traveling the same worn path in your thinking. Any collection of fragments can be your repository of dreams, your prompt book for brilliant ideas, or the start of a larger creative endeavor.
It seems as if though this is a rather tricky one for me. I say that not because I don't understand what is being shared in the eye opener, simply because it's a difficult one for me to relate to, because I'm not one for journaling and stuff like that. And what's ironic or interesting is the fact that I grew up in a household where my dad writes everything down, and so he has like books and books, like journals upon journals, you know, and I couldn't, like, for the life of me, I couldn't understand why, you know, why so much writing, how your day went, how you were able to address a problem and resolve it. That, to me, all of that is what I do mentally. I guess it goes with, if I'm kind of tracing back to my childhood somewhere, I guess it goes with the idea of, you know, my parents telling me, read with your eyes. So because of that, I kind of strayed away from all the excess writing. But to get to the point, in terms of what the eye opener is sharing, being able to express your creativity through journaling, be it if you're writing creatively, be it if you're drawing, or in some cases even photo documentaries. You're able to take a picture and you know describe what day, for instance, what experience you were having or what have you, and then the picture is best able to illustrate that. I am able to do that, like, as I mentioned, in my mind. Like, I have a somewhat vivid memory that I could recall certain things to great detail. Particularly if they have a certain impact on me, I'm able to do that. In terms of the creative part of it, in some cases, in most cases, because of my profession, I'm able to channel creativity through writing or other stuff that I'm involved with. And so not so much to be able to, you know, write a poem or write a verse for a song or that type of thing.
Now, you know, it's interesting. I don't think this is our first eye-opener on journaling, but it definitely is something that we hear recommended time and time again.
Yeah.
From psychologists to coaches to just people who encourage it as a way of allowing you to clear some of the mental clutter that you may have. And if we put it into perspective, it's like when you have your shopping list. You know everything that you need, but ultimately you end up writing it down, and then you're able to remember when you get to the grocery store. And it's kind of the same thing. I'm definitely one of those whenever people, and I always say I'm going to commit to do it more often, because it really does force you to address one thought at a time. Because that's what you're focusing on as you write. And that really is the practice, I think, that comes with journaling. It is the ability to be able to train that muscle for better focus. Yeah, you didn't think of it that way, did you? But I mean, it's even when you make plans. The best plans that you do make come with when you write them down. Whether, I mean, and it doesn't have to be written these days. It can be, you know, there are apps on your phone. You could have files on your computer.
A voice note.
But the physical part of writing does help a lot.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. I'll say that one.
There you go. You're not convinced, but that's the eye-opener for this morning, and definitely something you can try to pursue. We're going to get moving into our weather update for today. We all want to know what's happening. We have Angelia Guy on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm okay, and you?
We're trying to stay dry. That's a whole lot of rain out there. Tell us what's happening.
Okay, well, we have some moisture over the area. A cold front had entered the northwestern Caribbean over the weekend, and we're under a northeasterly airflow that's bringing back some moisture over our area.
Okay, and so what's our 24-hour forecast?
Okay, we expect a gradual decrease in moisture over the area. Looking at the radar imagery, we're already seeing a decrease in rain, but rain is concentrated mostly over central parts of the country and offshore.
Okay.
And that is to continue this morning and with some decrease this afternoon.
And or winds?
The winds will be generally from the east, 5 to 15 knots.
And what about, I see you have a caution for mariners. Tell us about the sea state.
Yes, likely just to continue for the earlier part of the day. We have a small craft caution in effect for gusty winds and locally rough seas near heavy showers.
All right. And our temperatures?
The high temperatures today will peak at about 82 degrees Fahrenheit along the coast, 84 inland, and 74 in the hills.
And for tonight?
Tonight, the low temperatures will range from 77 degrees Fahrenheit along the coast, 70 inland, and 65 in the hills.
All right. Now, here's the important question. How long is it going to last? What does the rest of the week look like?
Okay. We expect generally fair weather starting tomorrow.
Okay. Less rain?
Yes. Only isolated showers are expected for tomorrow and Wednesday.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that update.
You're welcome.
You have a great day.
Thank you, too.
Okay. There you have it.
At least by tomorrow, we're supposed to begin to experience better weather. It's yesterday and today.
Well, you know, after the scorcher on Saturday, I think yesterday was very comfortable. It's just so we count our blessings,
yes,
of course.
Certainly.
But with that out of the way, we're going to shift gears now to Eye on the News.
So we're virtually at the end of fiscal year 2021, and we're expecting that tomorrow during the special sitting of the House of Representatives, a new budget for the upcoming financial year will be presented. This would be the General Revenue Appropriation Bill 2022. The interesting thing in all of this is the fact that it would be the second budget being presented under the Briceño administration. And most of us would recall that when the initial budget was presented last year, it was based on austerity measures. It was based on all of these other things that the government of the day had to take into consideration because of the country's overall economic situation. And while we have seen a major improvement in our financial standing as a country, it will be interesting for us to see what will be presented and what areas the budget will focus primarily on. We know that notwithstanding the health crisis that has been brought about because of the pandemic, we're also looking at certain areas that perhaps would include infrastructure development, education, the agriculture sector, and what have you. And this, as I've mentioned, will be presented tomorrow, is expected to be presented tomorrow, and then both sides at the lower house and of course in the Senate would have ample time to be able to digest what is being presented before they return for the actual budget debate and the implementation of the budget at the beginning of the fiscal year on April 1st.
Yeah. So, you know, we have such a short-term memory sometimes. So a year ago this time would have been right in the thick of the union protest.
Yeah.
Because a big part of last year's budget was, of course, looking at the cuts in public wage bill.
The 10% salary reduction that public officers and teachers had to take because, again, of the economic situation brought about by the pandemic.
And at that point, the proposal was for 3 years.
Yes. And so there's been a turnaround in terms of government being able to meet its targets with respect of the 10% reduction. And there has been talk, as we've been following, that the 10% will be returned to the teachers and public officers quicker than what would have been anticipated based on that 3-year schedule.
Yeah, that's right. So I think they have set a date for the full restoration of that 10%. A part of our last conversation with the union was looking at the issue that the performance bonus was most likely off the table since they are now going back and restoring that 10%. So, you know, 1 year ago, this was the biggest issue, and it was really a challenging time because we understood very clearly the picture had been painted about the financial situation of the country, but at the same time, for many it seemed unconscionable that you'd be cutting 10% from public servants. But nonetheless, it did go through despite, I think, what was a record protest in length from the unions. And now this time around, it's presenting the budget where there have been, and I remember Dr. Martinez, the CEO, pointing out that while there has been economic growth, it's more recovery than actual growth because of the precarious financial situation the country was in pre-COVID.
Yeah. And so I think from a layman's perspective, and it goes back to the conversation that we had with Dr. Martinez fairly recently, where while the recovery process is being touted as somewhat of a success based on being able to reach those targets quicker than what was anticipated, when you look at the overall cost of living versus the income being generated by households, for instance, it's still very much a steep hill to climb. Let's put it that way, for want of a better expression there. But that is what we're dealing with, right? And another part of it, you would also recall that the government had to return to the House for several supplementaries. This was after the initial budget was tabled and approved and put into effect at the beginning of the 2021 or the delayed 2021 fiscal year, right? So all of these are things that we're looking at in the round. As I've mentioned, the presentation will be made tomorrow. You will have the subsequent debate. And what is curious about that, at least from my point of view, is that while you have the majority of the area representatives and members of government on the ruling side, you will only have 5, if that many, from the opposition who will be in attendance to raise any objection to what is being proposed. I say that because, well, we know the member for Queen Square has, for the most part, been a no-show in the House, and so what, if any, input would be, brought by way of that particular area, we will see what happens there. We also say that in the context of the former party leader and leader of the opposition who, as we know, has been dealing with his own personal issues and was absent from the last one, the last House of Representatives. And so it'll be interesting to see if he shows up tomorrow and, what will be the atmosphere, what will be the vibe going into the preparations for the subsequent debate later this month.
Well, yeah, that. And of course, the bigger issue is that they are in the thick of a leadership convention.
Yes.
And depending on the date of the budget debate, after tomorrow's reading, then we'll still see, 2 of those area representatives vying for that leadership post.
Yes. And from all indications, and I guess we've mentioned this last Monday, but because it's still very much a continuous and fluid situation, from all indications thus far, the date for March 27th remains set for the convention, the leadership convention for the United Democratic Party. And I was able to run into the acting party leader and the chairman of the UDP on Friday, and he reiterated that there has been no request being made on the part of Mrs. Panton to reschedule the holding of the leadership convention. So as far as we know, it's still very much full speed ahead.
Well, I mean, a big part of the news for today is looking at Honorable Panton's post over the weekend, where she clearly says that she will continue to pursue the leadership of the United Democratic Party, and she even uses the date on March 27th. So I think that's pretty indicative of the fact that she's proceeding with the existing schedule. Of course, we know she recently lost her husband in a very sudden health issue, and it is probably a really challenging time for her. And everyone had been asking whether or not she would continue, because it is a very challenging period of time. However, she has now made it explicitly clear that she will continue pursuing the post, and that means the campaign continues for the next few weeks.
Definitely. Another thing that we're looking ahead to later this week, Marlene, on the 16th of March, both parties, in this case, the attorneys for the Port of Belize Limited and the attorneys for the Christian Workers Union, they go back before Justice Lisa Schumann on Wednesday, the 16th of March. You would recall that there has been an interim injunction that was placed on the dispersal of the monies in question, and this is the $1.5 million that was awarded to the CWU on behalf of the stevedores with respect to the privatization of the Port of Belize Limited in 2002. That was some 20 years ago. And while that money was earmarked for distribution among the stevedores, it's also being called to how do I say, that money is still in question simply because the Port of Belize is also seeking damages for the industrial action that was taken by the stevedores fairly recently at the start of the year, and the fact that PBL is saying, look, well, we've lost a little over $1 million in revenue during that time that the stevedores took action. So that money is also being contested. Just a bit of a context, and I know most of you guys have been following, the CWU made a hurried move to try to distribute as much of these monies via check to its membership, notwithstanding the fact that there was a claim that was already filed before the Supreme Court ahead of that hurried distribution. And so there has been a stay being placed on it so that the matter can be heard, and then there will be a determination as to what becomes of that money. Yeah. Right? So this is scheduled for Wednesday afternoon in the courtroom of Justice Lisa Schumann. So that's the other one that we're anticipating. And then the third one, Marlene, you go ahead.
With
the royal visit.
Oh, the royal visit. Yes, that comes up this weekend.
Yes, it is.
So I know this is, a lot of people have been looking forward to it. The royal visit in celebration of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee with a tour of the Caribbean starts for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge this weekend, and Belize is the first stop.
Yes. So we will be welcoming Will and Kate to Belize officially.
I know, we feel so familiar with them, our generation, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, this is just Will and Kate to us. But so we have gotten some information so far about their tour of Belize. They're doing 4 days in Belize. So Belize will be the first stop on their Caribbean tour, and also it seems that we will be the longest tour. They're doing just about 4 days here.
Yeah.
So they arrive on Saturday. They'll meet with the Prime Minister, and then they head off to the south. They will be traveling to Indian Creek. They will also go to Hopkins for a Garifuna Festival, as well as seeing the Mayan site Caracol, followed by a visit with BATSUB members, and then a reception at Cajalpech. And then, I believe that would be the end of their tour, and they depart the following day.
Yeah.
So they're going to be seeing quite a bit of Belize. Again, you know, it's not the original reports that they were going to be touring on Burger Ski. They're doing more inland activities, which I think for us is better, because if they're going to other islands, they'll see sandy beaches and blue seas anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's a packed itinerary nonetheless.
Yeah.
What would be interesting, for me at least, would be to see the visit at Indian Creek and the Garifuna cultural presentation.
Yeah.
Those, I'm always big on culture and the idea of being able to share Belize's many cultures with outsiders, so to speak. People who come to visit Belize and to see what we have to offer by way of, you know, our way of life, our belief systems, our livelihood, and everything that makes us uniquely Belizean.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, I'm also really interested to see how they'll be received in Belize. So, you know, it was about 10 years ago when we saw Harry come, and he, you know, there were children lining the streets waiting for him to come in as the motorcade drove past. There was a street festival in Belmont Pan. We all remember him trying to punta and drinking rum, and even trying to talk a bit of Creole as well. So, you know, he was very well received, and people came out to just try to catch a glimpse of the prince. So I'm interested to see whether or not we'll see a similar reception for Will and Kate.
Yeah. Well, that remains to be seen, right?
All right.
So that rounds out most of what we, you know, well, perhaps all of what we decided to discuss with you guys today in terms of things you can look forward to in the days ahead. I know that we've been covering extensively what has been taking place in Belize City with a flare-up of gang activity over the past week. There has been an operation that was launched by the Belize Police Department to try to get a handle on, you know, the excess crime and violence related to gang activity. Of course, certainly an update on that will be provided later on today. There is a press conference that is scheduled, or a regular Monday briefing with the police department. I believe some of these points will be raised during that discussion, and so we'll be able to share that with you at 6 p.m. So that does it for our Eye on the News this morning. Remember, you can catch us live on 5 at 6 o'clock. You can catch our streaming content on Facebook and on YouTube.
All right, now it's time for us to get moving into our show for today. Now, last week when Cabinet released the information in the Cabinet brief, they spoke about the introduction of the cannabis licensing bill. And today we are going to be diving deeper into that conversation. We're going to be joined by Minister of Home Affairs and New Growth Industry to understand more about the work that has been done and what this new bill will do.
And since we're continuing with Women's Month, this morning our second conversation will be with Dr. Kyla Hichner. She's a Belizean who is the founder and president of an international foundation. And so she'll be speaking to us all about her foundation and how that fits in the context of Women's Month, Marlene.
That's right. So that's what we have in store for you. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Honorable Kareem Musa. So please stay tuned.
The ministry is collaborating with SpeedNet Communications to have a vaccination campaign for children ages 12 to 17 years. Children who get vaccinated will get a chance to win fabulous prizes, including backpacks with supplies, Nintendo Switch, tablets, book tuitions, and MiFi with 3 months data. Only children 12 to 17 years old can participate in this smart and Ministry of Health and Wellness raffle. At vaccination sites, each vaccinated child, upon being vaccinated, will receive a ticket to place their name, age, date of birth, BHIS number, and contact information on, which will be filled out by a parent or legal guardian. The sooner a person vaccinates, the more chances he or she will have to win. Get vaccinated, Belize. Vaccination saves lives.
After a rough week of school, Jake and his friends decide to treat themselves to frozen coffee. And since they don't have cash on them, they decide to use eCash. With eCash's geolocation feature, Jake can easily find the nearest coffee spot. With eCash's built-in option to split bills, Jake can pay the bill and his friends can reimburse their portion of the bill. Jake scans the merchant's code and confirms payment. Jake then views his transaction history and taps on the transaction recently made, then taps the Split the Bill button where he selects the Evenly option to evenly split the bill. The application splits the bill automatically. His friends receive and accept the request. Geolocation and splitting the bill via eCash makes Jake enjoy his digital lifestyle.
Tonight was really late.
That was so much fun since this pandemic forced us on lockdown and like my online classes and I was so stressed
Oh my
out.
God.
And I bet you're glad that you finally get out.
Yes, that's true. And Jack, girl, you will let loose. I never did expect that from you. Oh, Melanie.
Well defended again by Beverly.
Anyways,
He has just
this
been
is a nice ball.
defensively. George to drive and the finish. Posting up Marcus Morris.
My gosh. Look like Kobe hit him real hard. My gosh, Melanie.
He's getting his share of touches.
Now you the top.
First 4 minutes has 7 of their 9 points.
You see why me? The married life. She can even enjoy her friends like in a peace.
Mind your business. Someday you might find a great guy too.
Exactly. Well, I still kind of have a crush on he cousin. Oh, no, remember the one where I danced with at the wedding?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, I would have gone lockdown with he any day.
Anyways, when you don't cause enough trouble for one night, make her walk on her out.
Alright.
And now I believe I have to go to that place at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
morning. Morning. Your friend Melanie bring this for you on the way to work? Check it. Check it. You have to be more appreciative. You got some nice friend. And remember, nothing never happened last night, right? Right?
I love you, Jack. You have to do this for you. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. Your future self will thank you.
No. I need help.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, women and girls were at the highest risk of suffering domestic violence. Domestic violence involves violence between any member of the same household. It can happen to females or males, young or old. However, the evidence has shown that women and girls face the greatest risk. That risk has heightened due to the impacts of the pandemic, including job losses, mounting stress, and restrictions to movement and recreation. We can all help to combat violence against women and girls during the COVID-19 pandemic. Just like Melanie did, you can reach out to someone who is struggling and help them to find a way out. It is never easy, but together we can fight this. Belize will not be safe until its women are safe. Secure Belize.
And welcome back. Our first conversation, as we mentioned earlier, is with the Minister of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries. We have with us in studio this morning the Honorable Kareem Musa. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Isani, and good morning, Marlene. Thanks for having me on today.
You're welcome. Our primary conversation this morning surrounds the cannabis industry and the legislation and the framework that is to be put in place to be able to get this particular industry off the ground. Let's begin with the most recent developments in terms of the bill, what it encompasses, and perhaps who the affected parties, I say affected parties, mainly the stakeholders at various levels. What does this entail?
Well, as you would recall, Isani, last year, October, we had introduced in the House of Representatives amendments to the Misuse of Drugs Act. And this is following the very same trajectory as the previous administration in 2017, when they had made amendments to the Misuse of Drugs Act to allow for industrial hemp, if you would recall, from which there were an issuance of about 36 or so licenses for industrial hemp. Of that 36, only about 2 or 3 have actually gotten off the ground producing industrial hemp. Now fast forward to last year, October 2021, where we introduced a subsequent amendment to the Misuse of Drugs Act. Again, the reason for that is that cannabis is controlled and regulated under that particular act, along with all other drugs. So it is not that we are legalizing marijuana, and I think that is a common misconception out there. What we are actually legalizing is the cannabis industry. And so when that went to the House of Representatives last October, it enjoyed good support from the opposition. In particular, the current leader of the opposition supported it, as well as the Honorable Tracy Tager-Panton supported it, and I think one other from the opposition. But it passed through the House of Representatives, and when it got to the Senate, there were concerns that were raised, and one of the particular concerns raised by the social partner senators was that they felt that this was such a big industry, so to speak, that it should not be contained or limited under a Misuse of Drugs Act, but rather it should have an act on its own. Hence the reason we went back to the drawing table, and I think that's important, you know, to have the buy-in of all senators, not just the opposition senators, but to have a consultative process and input from as many partners as possible. And so what we're going to see tomorrow is just the first reading of the Cannabis Control and Licensing Act. So what it is basically is extracting what we had produced in October of last year in the Misuse of Drugs Amendment and now creating a stand-alone act. So that is what will be presented tomorrow for first reading.
Now, does it also mean that you would then have to remove cannabis from the Misuse of Drugs Act?
No, so it will still be an offense, for instance,
for over 10 grams.
if you do not have a license to cultivate cannabis, if you do not have a license to be a dispensary, if you don't have any of those licenses, it is still an offense. And what we're trying to prevent here, because we have to understand that cannabis has THC content, and so we have to be responsible moving forward. So we have to ensure that those who are involved in the industry are in fact meeting certain standards, and you hear it all across the world. Even in Jamaica, for the last few years, they've had their ups and downs with the industry because they're not hitting certain standards. I think you had a doctor on once from the CLA, the Cannabis Licensing Authority, saying exactly the same thing that our cannabis consultant is saying, that if you're going to be legalizing an industry, it cannot be that your product has pesticides in it. It cannot be that your product has mold or rot. It cannot be that it is laced with anything like harsh chemicals that are poisonous to your body. And so there are certain standards that have to be hit. And that is what we're trying to do moving forward. And so even though our cannabis legislation is unique in that it includes social equity licenses for the small man and the small farmer, we have to ensure that those small farmers are trained to ensure that they are hitting the standards as well, because we're not just producing cannabis for a local market. We have a lot of tourists that will be coming to the country. And imagine, for instance, if you did not know what was in a bottle of rum and they just gave you a bottle of rum and you don't know what was in there if they laced it with anything else. And that's the importance. We need to know the quantity of THC in each particular package that you're buying. So as a responsible buyer, you might say, okay, that has 5% THC. I might be willing to try that, but I don't want to try the one that has 10% THC. And so giving consumers the option in a very safe and responsible manner, that is what we're trying to create with this particular legislation.
What is your perspective on the stigma surrounding cannabis and marijuana usage, and the fact that you are at the helm of this entire movement to sort of bring an industry together and be able to have various stakeholders participate in this industry? I know that, for instance, growing up, you've heard people who are staunchly against marijuana usage. You also have people who are very strong proponents of it, but there's a cloud, there's a stigma that surrounds it altogether, and now you are at the forefront. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that Belize is a fairly conservative society, but at the same time, we have to recognize that we do have a lot of users, and so we cannot turn a blind eye to that. I would estimate, and others have estimated as well, that of our adult population, approximately 30% have used marijuana, consumed marijuana. And so that's a very high number when you think of it. If it's 200,000 people, adult population in Belize, we're talking 60,000 people use marijuana. And so we have to create a safe environment for them. It cannot be that we have this illegal trade. And that's a whole other topic for us to discuss, particularly when you look at Belize City under the microscope. All of these gang-related murders, they all stem from this very plant. And so we have to find a way to include these young men in a very responsible and safe system. So they have to be a part of the system in terms of dealing, but at the same time we have to understand that is the root cause. Yes, there may be a continuation in terms of retaliations, but when you look at it, all of the illegal drugs, again, we don't know what is in these drugs coming across the border, but they also come along with illegal firearms. And that is something that we have to curtail. And again, that is something we're trying to fix. If we produce local marijuana for these young men to sell, then they won't have to buy and dodge the police and come in illegally with this foreign marijuana, which we don't know what is in there.
Let's set aside the crime and violence aspect just for the time being. What I want to find out from you is, look, so we're creating an environment where marijuana or cannabis can be cultivated, wholesaled and retailed on the local market. But perhaps our climate, our conditions to be able to grow this particular strain of marijuana, for instance, may not necessarily be as conducive as perhaps somewhere in Mexico, where they could produce a strain of a higher quality. You will still have people trying to introduce the outside marijuana, so to speak. How would you be able to address the idea of the homegrown versus the imported illegal stuff?
I am convinced, Isani, and as well speaking to a number of consultants, not just our cannabis consultant, but across the region, that people feel more comfortable going into a dispensary and going on the shelf and being able to select what percent THC, indica or sativa. They feel more comfortable in that setting than buying illegal brick weed, so to speak, that comes in a saran wrap that you don't know what is actually contained therein. And so that by itself, the fact that you're going to be able to go into a dispensary that has packaging, that has labeling, that has safety recommendations, I think that's the kind of thing that's going to eliminate the illegal trade. Not completely. There will always be an illegal trade, but at the same time, it will lessen, in my opinion, especially since the cost of cannabis will go down since it's going to be locally produced.
It's like you're looking at local beer versus contraband beer.
Yes.
It's a similar scenario.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me come back to it. So, as you clearly pointed out, there's been a lot of work going into what direction Belize should go. And in all the conversations we've had so far, it doesn't seem that going what has been the tried and tested route of exporting or selling marijuana for the exclusive purpose of medicinal use, has that been explored for Belize? Because we have seen where other countries have been able to successfully implement that.
I don't see that as the trend. I see the new trend as going recreational. And going back to what Isani was saying, this has been such a stigmatized industry for so long that those in the industry realize that you cannot just go one day from having an illegal substance to one day, oh, this is totally legal and you can purchase it across the counter. And so there has been this gradual movement towards recreational, and one step along the way to recreational cannabis has been medicinal, because there are so many medicinal components to marijuana, to cannabis, that people are now realizing, especially with all the cannabinoids and CBD and the health benefits coming from CBD. But what we have to consider where we are along this chain. We are at a point now where 10 grams is legal for you to have in your possession. You did not have to go to a doctor to get a prescription for that 10 grams. And so we actually jumped that hurdle in 2017, the medicinal hurdle. And now it is legal for you to have recreational cannabis, but you have a very potentially dangerous substance, not knowing the content, not knowing where it came from, and again, tied to an illegal, illicit trade on the streets of Belize City. And so, while it is that, yes, some states are actually going medicinal first, those are the conservative states, It is expected that it's going to be federal very shortly, if not this year, next year in the United States. And most states are going to be going recreational. So Belize is actually going in tandem with a lot of the states in the United States of America moving in this direction of recreational.
Now, Minister, this has been a conversation that has been ongoing for quite a while. It almost feels like a party bag that you're showing the children, but you're not giving it to them. Yeah. What groundwork has actually been done?
Well, we've been working a lot in terms of looking at various legislations and trying to make one for Belize. It cannot be that we have the exact same legislation as any other place in the world. Like I said, we have a unique social equity component that other jurisdictions don't have. And that has been applauded by other countries in the world as well, because they realize that the people who have been affected by this trade are the black and brown populations of the world, and they have to be incorporated. And so we see where there is resistance in other parts of the world because they're trying to exclude them. And so we're saying, no, we have to make sure that those people are included, because they're the ones who have faced the harsh penalties, have served time in jail for this particular plant. And it's just crazy to think that. And so that is the direction that we're going.
Yeah, so you're talking about establishing things like the social equity license.
Yes.
Now, what about whether or not it will include things like criminal records?
Yes, the expunging of what a lot of people don't realize is that in the 2017 legislation, and I was just speaking to the commissioner last week about this, the 2017 legislation that decriminalized the possession of 10 grams of cannabis actually contained therein a provision that if you have a possession record for cannabis, you can apply to the commissioner of police to have your record expunged. And so a lot of people don't realize that. And so when meeting with the commissioner last week, I mentioned to him, moving forward, can we get a list of everybody who has a criminal record for possession, and can we expunge those records without them having to come to you or to apply to you to get those records? It should be automatic. He explained, of course, that under the old system, this is going all the way back to the 80s, those systems have not been updated to the more digitized, computerized system that you can just type in possession and all the people come up. So it will be a very tedious exercise, but a very important one, in my opinion, to ensure that everybody's record is expunged.
It's interesting you'd say that. 2 weeks ago, I was assisting a young man with getting his documents together to apply for a job. And part of that process was applying to the police department to get his criminal record. Now, this person is not a violent offender, so he doesn't have anything that reflects any kind of physical crime or what have you. When he was like 19 years old, this was many years ago, he was charged for possession. This is well over 20 years ago.
Wow.
Right? And so the record came up and it has charged for possession of the quantity of marijuana that he was found with. I'm saying all of that to say this, that even though we know that there has been this decriminalization process, and the fact that, you know, you can apply to the commissioner to have that record expunged, when you take that document to your employer, even though it says the date and the fact that, you know, there's a new law in place and all of that, you're still faced with this very same issue of being singularized, if I may. Like, you're being, you know, looked at as, okay, well, you have a charge for marijuana possession, and that perhaps is not favorable to some employers. How do you look at that situation in light of what we're saying, that it should be automatic?
Yes, and that's exactly the conversation that I was having with the commissioner, that if we are going to be moving in this direction, it cannot be that individuals who do not know that this law exists, that they're entitled to it, and so it should be something automatic. And then
that could have been proactive. That could, when they apply for the criminal record.
Exactly. So whenever, for example, personnel at the department, if they are producing that record and they do identify somebody is requesting a record but it has possession, I agree with you, that should automatically be expunged. And so, but I fully agree with you that it is something that like you said, you are singularized and stigmatized because of those possession charges, and you are treated as though you are a criminal, when in fact history has shown that cannabis is not as dangerous as alcohol abuse, is not as dangerous as smoking a cigarette that has the nicotine and has, you know, the tobacco in it. And so that's something that we are, in my opinion, it is a slow process, but I think we are pivoting to realizing that as a society.
So let's go back to some of the other groundwork that's being done. So these social equity licenses are meant for persons who are already involved in the trade.
Yes.
Because what we've seen in other countries is when you do open up for licenses, it's foreigners and people who have the means who will be the ones to invest first. And they box out people who've pretty much grown up, whether growing or selling marijuana. We talked about the aspect of the criminal record, but then there's also things like being able to access capital.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge obstacle moving forward, because that is the one thing that has not advanced. So even though, like I said, in America, they are moving slowly towards federal, it has not taken place yet. And so, as you know, Belize's banking system is highly dependent on what happens in America. And so that could affect correspondent banking here. And so what we're looking at is to create some sort of a community bank within the country that does not have any ties, any correspondent banking whatsoever with the United States. I think the National Bank would have been an ideal candidate for this. However, I was recently informed that they received correspondent banking because they didn't have it up until late last year.
And even a local bank will need to align with one of the larger banks.
Exactly. And so if you do not create that community bank, then it will be like it is in the United States, a cash-only system. And that's something we want to try to steer away from. But it is
of the potential for crime.
Absolutely. Which is why we have included in the legislation security licenses. That's going to be very important.
Other forms of money laundering, right? If you're dealing in a cash-only system, I would presume that you could move money and legitimize it.
Absolutely. So those are some of the pitfalls of it. But again, I think that the rate that we are going by putting in the framework now, it's not going to be for another couple months or even a year before we actually get a cultivation or first harvest, so to speak. By the time everything comes around, I think we will be on par with where the United States is. Like I said, they're about to go federal, and if they do go federal, that will not affect our corresponding, that will remove that obstacle. And so what we have been doing is getting in line, getting in place this train that's moving so fast to make sure that Belize has something to gain from it as well economically, because we haven't spoken about that. Yes, we could see where it will attack a lot of the social ills affecting us today, especially with crime and violence, but there's a huge economic opportunity that also lies ahead with this implementation of this industry.
I would assume, I would assume that there has to be what we would consider like a multi-sectoral dialogue in terms of this particular industry, in the sense that agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture should have some input in it. The Ministry of Economic Development should also have some input in that discussion. And of course, you're wearing two hats as the Minister of Home Affairs and of course, New Growth. What has that conversation been like in terms of trying to get that off the ground?
You're perfectly right, Isani, and moving forward, that is exactly the direction that we're going with the commission. So a lot of people come to me asking, can I get a license? And my first response to them, I will not have any say in the determination of who gets a license. It will be determined by a commission. And so that commission currently has 9 members, and like you just pointed out, all of those individuals, all of those ministries will have a seat. So it's not the minister that's going to be on the seat. They're going to appoint a representative to sit on there. So you're going to have the Ministry of Health,
Yes.
which is very
That too,
important.
yeah.
The
That's
Ministry of Tourism, because we don't want this to be something like New York, where everywhere you go, you can smell marijuana. It has to be that we are a cannabis accessible country as opposed to just marijuana everywhere. So we have to be very responsible moving forward, and that's why the Ministry of Tourism is an important partner and stakeholder in this. The Ministry of Economic Development will have a seat at the table, Ministry of Agriculture as well as a cannabis social equity coordinator, so that somebody there looking out for the small man to ensure that he too can get a license in this venture moving forward. So all of the important stakeholders and ministries will be represented at the table.
So let's move forward with the dispensaries and explain to us a bit more what the thought process is in who will be allowed to sell, where they'll be allowed to sell. I know it's very early, but clearly you have an idea.
It is very early, and I think Belize City is a unique situation.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very pragmatic moving forward in how we deal with Belize City and dispensaries in certain locations, especially, like you said, everybody that's currently involved, to make sure that they are involved as well and receive dispensary licenses moving forward from Belize City. But in larger destinations, like tourist destinations, we won't have as many dispensaries. So we might have one or two in San Pedro, one in Kikak, or one in Placencia. It cannot be everywhere. But the idea as well, moving forward, is that within resorts, certain resorts may be pro-cannabis, and they may have a consumption lounge within their resort, an area where you can go and have a smoke. They may be allowed to sell. So they would have to purchase from the dispensary, but be able to sell from their lobby, so to speak, in a certain area. And so that is, again, another huge economic earner moving forward for the country. Because like I said, if 30% of Belizean adults are consuming cannabis, you have to also understand that in America, the same movement is happening, and there may be even more than 30% of users. And when they come on vacation, they may want to relax and want to be able to go in a consumption lounge in a safe environment and consume cannabis.
And how does the Ministry of Tourism feel about this, especially if they market Belize as a family destination?
Yes, and that is why moving forward it's very important. I believe we have very good support from the Ministry of Tourism, but again, that's the discussion that we're having, that we want to be a cannabis accessible nation. We currently are a cannabis accessible nation, you know, but you have to go on the street corner
But they break
in
the law
a dark
every time
hole.
they buy.
Sorry?
They break
the law every time they buy,
buy.
and it's a very shady business, and so you have people accosting the tourists every day, and so that is the kind of thing that we want to remove and to make it, like I said, a very safe and responsible way for you to purchase and access cannabis.
From an entertainment point of view, I say entertainment in terms of like nightlife and that sort of stuff. Will we see a rise in the number of hookah bars and other places where you can, you know, consume marijuana in a social setting?
I believe so, and that is the intent and purpose of the consumption lounge license. There will also be restaurant licenses. A new phenomenon that's growing are chefs that actually cook with cannabis. And so you'll have restaurant licenses, you'll have consumption lounge licenses. The idea though, and the thinking is that you should not have a consumption lounge license in a bar. And so you don't want to be mixing alcohol with cannabis. And so if it is that you're just going to be providing cannabis, you can get a consumption lounge license, but not offer alcohol at that location, only cannabis. So there will be a growing number, not a lot. Like I said, you don't want it to be so prevalent. And I'm sure the churches will insist that it's not so prevalent. So moving forward, again, a limit on those types of things.
Now, let's go back to the churches, because we know they were very quick to stand up and say they weren't consulted the last time around. What's been the consultation this time?
We had a very good dialogue with the Council of Churches prior to the launching of the first bill in October of 2021. A very fruitful discussion, very sober discussion. And they were insisting that, you know what, we don't want cannabis to be in the hands of our young people. And I fully appreciate that. And they're one of the groups that said, you know what, maybe 18 is not the age because your brain is still developing. Let us move that age to 21. And so again, that's another very good aspect of this act that we have to look at, that in order for you to have cannabis in your possession, you have to have an ID card and you have to be 21 years or older. We saw a very disturbing video of a young man just last week. We saw one with alcohol and we saw one with cannabis. And that's what we're trying to fix. We're trying to avoid that because that young man should not have cannabis in his possession. He has to be 21 years or older so that we know that the brain can fully develop before you can access cannabis. And right now, that's not the law. We want to change that to make it more responsible.
Well, that's an interesting point because I think that's, yeah, I've had conversations with people looking at the very same point you made earlier, where we have a serious problem with alcohol, excessive alcohol use in this country. And there's a lot of thought and stipulations being put in place for cannabis, where clearly you mentioned the effects aren't as bad. Do you now take the opportunity to look at the legislation when it comes to alcohol to be able to address the weaknesses there, and then the very tricky and challenging part of enforcement?
Enforcement, yes, that I think is the very difficult part, Marlene. We see a lot of road traffic accidents that are occurring because of alcohol abuse. And I think that the Department of Transport is very mindful of that. The police department is mindful of that. I know that we recently approved an increase in the number of officers for the Department of Transport for that very reason, to be on our highways to ensure that individuals are not driving while under the influence of alcohol. And I think that we all have a role to play moving forward. The media as well, in terms of education campaigns on the abuse, not just of alcohol, but tobacco, of cannabis, of all these different substances. I think that we all have to play a role moving forward in that educational campaign.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have the detailed statistics that we should. But if you even go back and look at the murder statistics that we do have, and some of the violent crimes and crimes of passion that we talk about, many of them, your commissioner would say, are most likely linked to alcohol abuse. So while we have all this conversation about stipulations put in place for cannabis, why not take the time to look at the enforcement for alcohol as well?
Yeah,
I don't know if anybody gets asked for an ID when they go to the store.
It's true.
And if you have, please document it, because it's an anomaly.
And I was just going to say that I have heard of instances, I haven't witnessed it myself, but young children going to the store to buy alcohol, and it's so easy for them to purchase alcohol.
It says alcohol won't be, 1, consumed on the premises, 2, sold to the persons under the age of 18. But that is only there for what?
To say that they are complying with the law. But in fact, like you're rightly pointing out, it happens a lot. And so as a community, again, I know that in our particular neighborhood in Kings Park, we have a very vibrant neighborhood watch group. If they know of instances where alcohol is being sold to minors, they will report it. And then that particular establishment would be sanctioned and their license would be taken away from the liquor licensing board. And so we do have to look at that, not just from a police standpoint, but from a community standpoint, that we all can play a role in terms of curtailing that very serious issue of making alcohol available to minors.
All right. And so what's your prediction in terms of the rollout from this first reading to when we start to see the movement on the ground for the cannabis industry?
Well, assuming that we do get the support from the Senate, which would be, I believe, second reading would be in 2 weeks, well, not 2 weeks, in a week and a half, next week, Thursday. If we do get that approval, the next step would be to form the commission that I spoke of that will determine licenses. That commission will then look at regulations. So again, input from all the stakeholders in terms of moving forward in a very responsible way from all our partners, coming up with regulations for the industry. That could take, in my opinion, another month or two. So that would take us somewhere around June. for them to start deliberating and considering applications for the various licenses moving forward. So again, a harvest would take maybe 3 months. It would be more towards the end of the year that we would have our first Belizean harvest of cannabis, and then of course that would then have to be packaged with a manufacturing license and then put on the shelves on a dispensary. Of course, we will have to set up a cannabis monitoring unit. Now that's going to be comprised of a personnel from Baja, personnel from the forensics department, and a member of the Belize Police Department. So they're going to be the enforcers in the industry to make sure that your product is safe to go on the shelf, to make sure it has a particular THC content that you're saying that it has, to make sure it's not laced with anything, make sure it doesn't have pesticides on it. All of these things moving forward would have to be put in place. So what we're discussing now is just the framework, just the structure. And I know you're probably thinking, why don't we have all those things in place? But we can't until the legislation passes, and then we can activate to get those things in place.
All right, so let's shift gears now. And one of the conversations we must discuss is looking at the situation of crime and the recent gang flare-up. Let me just get your perspective. You've spoken with some of the very active members in gangs directly. You have attempted to convince them to convert their lifestyle, but yet we still struggle.
Yeah, I think I said a while back, and I think the commissioner echoed my sentiments when we had the truce, the various truces across Belize City with various groups late last year. And that resulted in a calm for maybe 2 months. November and December were fairly calm. And I think I mentioned then that the only way a truce can really work is if these young men turn in their guns. What we have right now is a very serious situation, a very critical situation. Like I said, a lot of it stemming from this very plant that we just discussed. A lot of the guns and ammunition coming from the cartels in Mexico are coming along with the cannabis. And so our borders, as you know, are very porous. And so the influx of guns, a lot of people are calling for an amnesty. But even with an amnesty, I can tell you, if you give up a gun today, 2, 3, 4 can come across the border the very following day. And so it's going to take these young men who are currently involved in the trade to realize that they are only killing out each other in many instances, not for any serious reason. It's just a matter of retaliation. You killed my uncle, I'm going to kill your dad, I'm going to kill your mom, I'm going to kill your friend. And many times it's innocent people that are affected. And so there are two approaches that I believe we have to employ. One is that we have to look at these young men to see how we can reform. I am a firm believer in that, and I will never stop believing in that. But at the same time, once we give them that opportunity and they choose not to reform or they choose not to work along with us in a meaningful, productive way, and they choose instead to carry out retaliations, to carry out murders, that is when we have to employ the long arm of the law. And a lot of people look at the police department and say, but just last week you were intervening or you were mediating, and now you're coming down heavy on us. In any other jurisdiction, it's not the police department that does mediation or does interventions. And so that is why we have called for this multi-sectoral approach. We see now Mr. Dawson, we see the Department of Youth Services intervening. They're taking on that role. But at the same time, the job of the police department is to get the guns off the street and to prevent crime from happening, prevent these murders from happening.
Something struck me last week, Minister, when I did several stories. The death of the young man, Karel Sanchez from Flamboyant Street, who got killed in that crossfire off Logwood Street, that was one. And the other was the raid on the Baptist residence on Thursday. What struck me is the fact that these are the very same individuals who are involved in the mediation process. We've seen pictures where they are part of the dialogue, the discussion with the leadership intervention unit. And in the middle of all of that, the commissioner made the point that these are men who, by day, give the impression that they're intent on reform, and by night, they are the very same ones who are going out attempting to execute each other. And in the middle of it is the police department trying to broker a peace or a sort of a ceasefire between the two parties. That has to be a very tough situation for you to find yourself in as the minister.
It is a tough situation, Isane, but I am comforted in the fact that we have a roadmap and a way forward with the Leadership Intervention Unit. We only started that project last year in October, getting the buy-in from government, and we do not have the necessary resources to carry out all our plans, but we've only scratched the surface of what that plan really entails. For instance, a lot of people don't know that currently we are training violence interrupters, 60 of them. So Mr. Dawson by himself cannot solve crime all on his own. He's not Superman. As much as I respect him and I value the incredible work that he does, it's not a one-man thing. And so he's now going to have a team coming from the community itself where these young men are. Law-abiding citizens who say, you know what, we have had enough of crime. We want to fix this. We want to work with these very same young men who are involved in crime. So you have teachers, you have principals who are taking this violence interrupters training, who have a good relationship with these young men to guide them. And so moving forward, we're going to have all of these groups in the respective neighborhoods who are going to be working along with these young men, like I said, to make sure that they stay on the right path. I can tell you that while it is that we are counting the number of murders that happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I can tell you the number of murders that have been prevented just by the interruption and intervention of these very same community activists and community members who are saying, we're tired of the crime, we want better for our young men, and we're going to be a part of the solution as opposed to just complaining about it. And so that's a very reassuring feeling for me as a minister to know that we're not in this alone. Yes, we have the police department and they go above and beyond in terms of what their responsibilities are, but at the same time we now have a community movement coming from the Leadership Intervention Unit that I'm very, very comforted by moving forward. It's going to take some time. I always say that, but I do believe in the process, and I do believe that there is going to be some dividends that we'll be seeing in the months and years to come.
Minister, help us understand. You know, a few years ago when you were in opposition, you shared the perspective I think that the public does right now. Something has to be done, has to be done now. Of course, now you have the benefit of all the internal information. What has shifted your perspective, and what can help us understand why the situation is as bad as it is?
I think the situation is as bad as it is because of the drug trade, the illegal drug trade, and the guns that have been coming into the country in the last few years. It's now, I mean, the commissioner could tell you some neighborhoods have crocus bags full of guns. Imagine that our streets, it's so easy to access a firearm. And that's why we're working with agencies like Crime Stoppers. They have a very active campaign right now in terms of trying to find the guns that are on our streets. And we need to also consider moving forward perhaps increasing the penalty for possession of an illegal firearm. Right now it's 3 years in jail. And as you know, a whole household will be rounded up if a firearm or ammunition is found. But perhaps it is time to revisit that legislation to increase the number of years in terms of a penalty, because obviously these young men don't see it as a deterrent to have an illegal firearm.
They hide it in an empty lot.
Or they bury it. A lot of it is buried, and so that makes the police work difficult. But I have to take the opportunity as we're raising it to commend the good work of the Special Patrol Unit last week in taking a very violent weapon off the streets, a Mach-10. I don't know if you understand the level of mayhem and carnage that could result from such a deadly weapon on our streets. But it just goes to show that particular point that guns are so accessible and are everywhere on our streets, and we have to work with different agencies in getting them off the streets. So again, I want to commend the police work in getting the firearm, the Mach-10 off the streets, as well as the firearm that was found, I believe, in the neighboring yard of the Baptist last week. And one other thing that I want to echo the sentiments of Miss Debbie Sewell. I heard her say it last week on Love FM, that how we approach situations is very important. So the police department is always the villain, always the bad guy. Police is always abusing us. But when you look at these videos, when a police unit is entering a yard, they get insults, they get attacked, they get items thrown at them, they get people with guns in the yard. And so perhaps that's the reason everybody is reacting that way to police, because they know maybe they're hiding a fugitive, or maybe they're hiding firearms, and they have to react that way.
Or they've had a bad experience.
Or they had a bad experience. But you have to understand that the police is just trying to do their work. They're going to carry out searches. So you may want to resist a search on your premises, but it is illegal for you to resist a search on your premises, especially if they come in with intelligence that you do have weapons on your property. And so I want to echo the sentiments of Ms. Ewell in saying that let's not resist. Let us work along with the police department, and then there will be no issues like these arising. And so I want to request the compliance of members of the public. Whenever a police comes, just comply with their requests, and everything will flow smoothly from there.
But it goes right back to, and I know we haven't talked about it in a while, but it goes back to building that relationship with the community. Whether perceived or whether they've actually had a bad experience with the police, very often people feel that it is not a relationship where the police is there to help them.
Yeah, like I said, the police has gotten a bad rap, and in some instances, justifiably so. We're not going to shy away from the fact that there are rogue cops or corrupt cops that are out there. Those officers, like I said, one by one, we're taking them out of the department. Just in the last year, we have taken out over 100 officers from the department. That's a lot. And I think the most in any 1 year in the history of the police department. And that goes to rebuilding this type of confidence and restoring this confidence with members of the public. And I think the media has an important role to play, because I see a lot of social media, Facebook sites that proclaim to be media, that their sole objective is to attack the police department every single day. And so they're feeding into this narrative that police are bad and us gang members, we're not bad. Even though we're hiding fugitives and have firearms on our premises, we'll make the police the bad guy. And so the media has a very important role to play in correcting that narrative. And I think Channel 5 may have corrected a narrative just last week, because there were items being thrown at the police department in a very hostile environment when they went on Police Street last week. And so, again, everybody has a role to play, including the media, in shaping the narrative moving forward, and keeping police officers accountable to make sure, again, that we don't have these rogue elements or these corrupt elements within the department.
I want to go back to, we had a conversation with the commissioner a few weeks back, and one of the things he said is that he's hoping that you can get another intake of officers. While you speak of about 100 officers being let go for bad behavior, essentially, there was also a loss of others, retirement, and those who just left the force. So the force is smaller than what you inherited, even with a new intake.
It is.
The budget will be presented tomorrow. We know crime is a huge issue. Will we see that reflected?
We are looking how we can utilize the recurrent budget. There is a budget in there for an intake, a much smaller one. Last time it was 225 officers. We're looking to reach either 125 or 150 officers in this next intake. So there is that included in the upcoming budget. And like you said, when you look back at 2016, the department was at 2,600 police officers. Currently, we're at 2,100 officers. And so even when we speak of Plan Belize and saying we want to get to 4,000 police officers, we're still way behind. We're still lagging behind, and we're losing officers, like you just rightly pointed out. And so, and another intake is important. We have to look again at the economy, at what is available to us as a department. But there is something in there for another intake this year.
Let me go back to an earlier question I asked, and I guess you can reflect on your time in opposition to remember what it feels like. The public is impatient to see the situation of crime get under control. How do you respond to that?
I think the public certainly, especially in Belize City, feels that it's a very tense time. We've seen crime, different forms of crime taking place all across the country, a lot of domestic violence, crimes happening, a lot of crimes of opportunity, a lot of robberies. And the public, like you said, realizes that we're living in a very difficult time. Gas prices are up, cost of living is up. Crime obviously stems from poverty. And so all of these things are interconnected. But moving forward, I think the public is aware that despite all of that, the police department is trying its best. They have made their presence known in Belize City in the last few weeks. We've brought in the operational units from all across the country to descend on Belize City. And so there's a very deliberate move right now as it relates to the gang crimes in Belize City. That we'll have to find a way to continue that, and it can only continue with more intake of officers to have that greater presence of police on the ground, while at the same time implementing our roadmap or strategies for reform. Because like I've said before, we went from 4 gangs in the country of Belize in the 1980s to now 28 gangs in 2022. We have to break that cycle. And so if we don't break that cycle and go and target the young men to make sure that they're not recruited, to make sure that they have free education and they have opportunities, educational and employment after education, that's the way we solve crime. And so that's, again, something that's going to take a while, because we're trying to break the cycle is really what we're trying to do, to make sure they're not 30, 40, 50 gangs the next 20 years from now. So that's going to be obviously a long-term plan, but at the same time we have our immediate actions that the LIU is taking, as well as the police department.
Let me get your input here on one more issue, well, 2 more really. One is looking, as you pointed out, the situation of cost of living and fuel tax. I'm sure you've heard it from your constituents. We understand when there's a lack of resources, how it can cause a spike in crime. What's your thought on the situation with the fuel tax and the raising cost of gas?
Well, it's not necessarily the fuel tax, so to speak, and I think that is a conversation that we now need to start having. It is really based on the cost per barrel of oil, the acquisition cost. When we look at 2020, the cost per barrel of oil was $40, and now the cost per barrel on the world market is $110. So $40 and $110 in 2022 is a huge difference.
More than doubled.
Yes, and so we're not the only ones in the world facing this crisis. Everywhere in the world, I think in California, it is almost $6 a gallon, which is 12 Belize dollars. So we see it reflected in other parts of the world as well. But at the same time, I think we need to be more responsible in terms of our use of the roads, in terms of use of our vehicles. We need to carpool more with our friends and colleagues to get to work. I think we just have to move a lot more smartly given the current cost of fuel that we're facing.
And on the political front, the opposition is in a leadership convention. Any thoughts on that one?
It's interesting. I don't want to opine on it, but just at the same time to extend my condolences to the Honorable Tracy Tager Panton. I can't imagine what she must be going through, having lost her husband just last week and has to now face a leadership convention. One would have expected that we would have seen a delay or an extension in time for her to at least grieve. I think that's important for her because this is a lot to take on. You have to travel the country and to go up against another party colleague. So that's something that I would have wanted to see as an outsider. But other than that, I don't have any opinions moving forward as to who I think will win the convention.
All right. Any closing thoughts?
No, I want to thank you very much for having me on, and of course to reassure the members of our public, our Belizean public, that the police department is doing all that it can with the very limited resources to curb crime in our country, crime and violence in our country. And yes, it's something that definitely keeps us up at night, but at the same time, we have to keep on it because it's something that, again, while we inherited it, we can make no excuses, but we have to include as many partners as possible.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you too.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be highlighting a Belizean doctor making strides in the United States. We'll tell you more about Dr. Kyla Hichner when we come back.
Technology is ubiquitous, and it's transforming how, when, and where we work. Full-Tech Systems is placing award-winning devices in the hands of information workers, allowing them to work without compromise in a world without wires, to innovate, create, and to maximize productivity anytime, anywhere, satisfying the needs of the desk-centric remote and field worker and every other worker in between. We are providing the industry's best devices to businesses going through the process of digital transformation. Partner with us today to provide the solutions that will allow your employees to work effectively and efficiently to enhance your customers' experience. Full-Tech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
Bundle the fastest, most reliable, unlimited broadband in Belize with your prepaid or postpaid mobile plan or Netflix. You can bundle your broadband with your prepaid and enjoy 50% off all national calls, plus get SMS and data. Paid plans? Then bundle with any speed and pay only $25 extra monthly to enjoy unlimited smart-to-smart calls, plus 500 minutes, plus 6,300 megabytes of data. Stream unlimited HD movies and TV shows with our broadband, plus the Netflix add-on for only $30 monthly, and enjoy streaming on your laptop, TV, phone, or tablet. Visit a smart showroom near you to sign up or upgrade to the bundle that's right for you. Smart, bringing people together.
Together we can stop the violence by being responsible and respectful partners and fathers in the future.
I will take responsibility to respect women and girls and hold other young men accountable who use hurtful behavior and speech.
Toxic masculinity traits and harmful social norms about how men should behave contributes to gender inequality and violence and fear that women and girls face.
I realized that gender-based violence is a problem that will never end until all boys and men work to end it by resolving conflicts without violence.
We all have a responsibility, and that is why we encourage others to spread this message, to commit to advancing gender equality and to end gender-based violence.
I commit.
I commit.
I commit.
I commit.
I commit
to make changes to end
violence
in my life
and elsewhere.
Together we can stop the violence.
Lamb's Funeral Service can assist you with a dignified send-off for your dearly departed, offering a complete funeral package which includes cremation, dressing, preparation, and repatriation of remains. Caskets, wreaths, and tombs are uniquely made by us. We provide quality service at the most affordable price. Give us a call or WhatsApp at 626-5732 or 623-2597. During ceremonies, the option of live streaming is available. Lamb's Family Funeral Service. It's not just a business. We are a shoulder for you to lean on.
The Social Security Board, in collaboration with the Labor Department, takes this opportunity to remind insured persons of the requirements for compensation when on sick leave. Any employee who has worked with an employer for at least 2 months is entitled to 16 working days of sick leave with full pay every year. This is how it works. Upon approval of a sickness or injury benefit claim by SSD, 80% of the employee's weekly insurable earnings is paid as a Social Security benefit, and the difference in the employee's salary is paid by the employer. This is to ensure that the employee does not suffer any loss of wages when ill. After 16 days, compensation for sick leave is paid as a Social Security benefit only. Some conditions apply. This message is brought to you by the Social Security Board and the Labor Department. Social Security Board, safeguarding you, your family, your future.
Hola usuario de eCash, la aplicación eCash está disponible en español. Cambiar el idioma de tu aplicación de eCash de inglés a español es rápido y sencillo. Deja mostrarte cómo se hace. Primero, Abre tu aplicación eCash. Introduce tu PIN. Toca el icono More en la parte inferior de tu pantalla. Selecciona Security. Selecciona Language. Y luego selecciona Spanish. Vuelve a introducir tu PIN y ya está. Tu aplicación de eCash está ahora en español y puedes seguir disfrutando de tu cartera digital eCash. La aplicación eCash de Belize Bank te hace la vida más fácil.
Introducing next-gen supersonic speed for the ultimate home Wi-Fi experience. New customers can now enjoy faster residential internet speeds of 25, 50, 100, and 150 megabytes per second, as low as $49 a month. Existing next-gen customers will receive an automatic speed upgrade at no extra cost to reflect our new supersonic speed. Count on us to keep you connected with the speed you need at unbeatable prices. Select the internet plan that works for you. Make the switch and sign up today. NextGen, bringing you the ultimate digital experience.
Back and we're moving into our second conversation for today. Of course, we are commemorating Women's Month, and so we're highlighting women doing great things. And we have Belizean Dr. Kyla Hichner joining us this morning, and she is the founder and president of the Promise Foundation International. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we are so happy that you had the time to be able to join in this morning and tell us all about the great work that you've been doing. Dr. Hichner, let's just talk a bit about your professional career before we talk about the establishment of the foundation. You've been doing great things for a while.
Okay. So as you know, Marlene, we went to St. Catherine's Academy. We could go all the way back there, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And then we went, after St. Catherine's, I went to St. John's Junior College. I got a Jesuit scholarship to Detroit Mercy. After Detroit Mercy, I went to Jamaica, the University of the West Indies. That's where I did medical school. Then I did a family medicine specialty training stint in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the United States, and I've been here ever since. Currently, I live in Florida. I work as a hospital medicine doctor, so I'm a general medicine doctor in the hospital. I've served as medical director for hospital medicine in Texas. I've had different leadership roles in primary care, leadership in primary care. I've started my own practice a couple of years ago. I was running the Healthy Promise family practice, which is no longer in existence. But I've had quite a bit of variety in medical practice and leadership roles. And now, like I said, I work as a managed care. It's a special type of model of hospital medicine in Florida.
What inspired you to get into the medical profession? Was it something perhaps from your childhood or somewhere in your youth you decided that this is what you want?
I've always, from the longest as I could remember, I've always wanted to be a doctor. I thought I was meant to be a surgeon. And so I was pretty hyper-focused on making that dream a reality for myself. So basically, I'm living my dream right now. I'm fortunate, a lot of people don't know what they want to do until later on, but I knew pretty early that that's what I wanted to do. And then in 2005, my mom suddenly passed away from heart disease. It wasn't expected, but she had a long struggle with diabetes. And so that's made me even more determined to try to help to prevent that to happen to other people.
Yeah.
From happening to other people, yeah.
Yeah. So you turned it around and you were able to. So let's talk about family medicine for a bit and what that encompasses.
So it's a relatively new specialty. So it's the equivalent of a general practitioner. In some countries, you don't need to have a general practitioner training to practice as a general practitioner. But in the United States, you do. It's a requirement, and in some other countries you do as well. And so that's what family medicine is. It's training it's like you're a master of all, but you're a jack of all, but you're a master of none. So we get surgical training, obstetrics training, hospital medicine training. During my family medicine training, I specialized in hospital medicine, and that's why I do hospital medicine work now.
Yeah. So it's essentially kind of reinforcing the concept of preventative care. Like you can catch conditions early and keep them properly maintained.
Exactly, and that's what I really enjoy about my current role in managed care, because the focus is preventative care. The focus is keeping people out of the hospital. It's bringing value back to the role of the primary physician or your general doctor in Belize. The goal is to keep you healthy and keep you out of the hospital, because there's so many things we can prevent through education, through practicing self-care, through the basics, diet and exercise. Everything does not have to go catastrophic. We don't have to get to the point of having to require hospitalization all the time. There's a lot that we can do individually and as communities to prevent progression of chronic diseases especially.
So tell us a bit about the Promise Foundation International. What do you guys set out to do, and how is your public benefiting from the services and the efforts that you're undertaking?
Okay, thank you for asking me about the foundation. I love to talk about the foundation. So I was fortunate to acquire all this education from St. Catherine's to the end of medical school via scholarships. And so I'm very aware from living in Belize and from living in Jamaica that there are so many bright, passionate, driven young people who have the discipline, they have the drive, but they face challenges in getting the opportunities that they need to pursue their educational path. So that's where the idea came. If I could do it, I'm sure tons of other young people could do it and even more. So I joined with some of my friends from different Caribbean countries that I've met throughout my life and different stages of education, and we came together and we formed the Promise Foundation. So our goal is to inspire, to educate, and to empower young people. And we do this primarily through providing scholarships and mentorship to teens who apply to be Promise Foundation scholars. So applications are actually open for the 2022 cohort of students. This is our second year collecting applications. We have a 2021 cohort, and that consists of about 7 students from different Caribbean countries. I really encourage our Belizean teams to apply and to complete the application process. The 2021 cohort does not have anyone from Belize, unfortunately.
Wow.
That would be awesome if we could get some of our students in there. All the scholars are assigned a mentor who are about my age, from a Caribbean country, and has similar paths or similar goals. We try to focus on students who want to pursue careers in STEM and education fields. So science, technology, education, math, and who want to be teachers, because I think teachers are super important. Teachers are the foundation to all these other professions in STEM and other areas of life. So we're trying to focus on students who want to do those things.
What countries are you currently working in?
The students that we are working with are currently from Barbados, from Trinidad, and from Jamaica. Okay. We also partner with other foundations. We're starting to do that, and the one we're partnering with right now is from Haiti. It's called Messengers for Action. And so we're partnering with their school in Haiti to try to support them as well. All of our work is through fundraising. So we carry out different fundraising activities during the year to try to gather funds to do these, to provide the scholarships and to help to support the STEM programs that we identify that could be helped.
Oh, wow. And the scholarships that you offer, they're for what level?
Okay, so it depends on what country you're in.
Okay.
In Belize, it's high school. It's a full scholarship for anywhere between the 1st to the 4th year of high school. We allow people who've gotten it once to reapply. Okay. So if you get the first year, if you meet certain criteria, you get to reapply, and then you are provided with a full ride for the next year. In Trinidad and in Barbados, our focus is on post-high school level. So these are early college students. The scholarship is less, their tuition awards, but they still are required to meet certain criteria to receive them and to be qualified for the next round. So the criteria that we look for are community service activities. You have to participate in our book club because we are strong encouragers of readers from early. So we pick a book every semester and we talk about the book. We try to garner the lessons that we could use in our own lives from the books. And then we have a workshop schedule, so a teen workshop schedule that goes every other month. And we talk about a different topic that's relevant to teen development. So talk about this month in March, on March 24th, our topic is mental health in teens.
Oh, great. Now, you said something very important, that you don't just offer scholarships, but it comes along with a mentor. From your experience, I'm sure you've mentored some of the children. What are some of the things you've learned? What's changed? What's the same about growing up in these different countries?
Well, there's a lot of similarities still. I think technology is an area that's a lot different. We didn't rely so much on technology when we were growing up, but now we need to have different media to allow our work to get done. That's probably one of the major differences, but a lot of the basics of being a successful student is the same as when I was growing up. I mean, it's tenacity, it's consistency, it's sticking to it. It's what we try to add now because we're more aware of self-care and the importance of the mind to overall success, is to make sure that we're encouraging ways for them to take care of themselves and to stay mentally well as well. So the emphasis is not just on study, study, study. It's on study plus, did you exercise? Did you meditate? Are you eating well? And that kind of thing.
What has been your success rate in terms of being able to see these scholarship recipients, these students, all the way through?
Well, we just started in 2020, and last year was our first cohort of Promise Foundation Scholars. So this is just 1 year of completing with the sessions with one group of students. So we don't have a success rate as yet. We will know probably in a couple of years how well they really do. But from our experience right now, I think that our intervention is very helpful. They're assigned, like I said, a mentor early on in the process. The mentors touch base with them about every 2 weeks or so, every month for some people, just depends on the needs of the students. And so we haven't followed it to the end as yet. We're pretty early in the process.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because you talk about how you use your own personal experience to kind of grow this opportunity for others. And we know the realities in Belize. Scholarships are very much sought after. What's your hope in being able to get more Belizeans to apply through the foundation and to access the benefits?
We try to reach out and make connections with the elementary schools, the primary schools.
Yeah.
Last year, that was our strategy. I think this year we're going to try to reach out to even more schools to encourage their students to apply. That's basically our tactic right now. And then there's a lot of social media presence. If you follow us on Instagram or follow us on Facebook, or go to our website even, you can keep abreast of the activities, refer your friends, your family members, anyone who you think could commit to this process and would benefit. And obviously we ask for proof of need about would benefit from the scholarships. So we're still coming up with ideas of how to be more successful in garnering successful applicants from Belize.
Yeah. So when is the application period? So people who are watching right now, parents may be watching and saying, my child can use this extra help.
Well, the applications are already updated on the website. So anyone could go on there at any time. It's Promise, the PromiseInspired.org. And you go on there and you look under Get Involved. And you'll scroll down and you'll see the applications there for non-US students. That's the form that you will fill out. There's supporting documents that we ask for. And there's a principal form. There's an essay that they have to write. Those are the main things. We ask for a transcript as well, of course.
Yeah.
And then, but the important thing is that the application has to be completed. What we found last year is that people would start the process, but then they don't finish all the requirements. And so then that kind of disqualifies them from being successful in the application. But we're pretty understanding, we're pretty generous. We know that this is a difficult time, especially with COVID. And so we're flexible in that way, but we still require some standard of completing the applications as best you go.
Okay. And I see that you have a virtual run coming up as well. This is part of your fundraiser?
Yes, this is our most recent fundraiser. It's a virtual 5K run and walk. So that means that there's not a specific location that you have to be at. You could run, walk, you could ride your bike, you could run on your treadmill, whatever you want to do, as long as it's 5 kilometers long. You take pictures and you tag us in there. It's $30 to sign up, or you can make a donation. And this is one of our big fundraisers to fund the scholarships that are coming up.
Anything else you'd like for people to know about the foundation, how they can support? And most importantly, I think the fact that the students get assigned a mentor, that's such a great opportunity for you to share with them and for them to learn from others.
Right.
Yeah.
I just encourage everyone to refer a friend, refer their relatives, try to apply. I mean, I'm sure there are I really do believe that we have a lot of qualified students in Belize and the rest of the Caribbean, of course, who could benefit from these scholarships. So you could just share it, apply, finish it. And also, if you are interested in donating or supporting us in any other way, we're always looking for mentors as well. Those are ways that you could participate. You could refer, you could apply to be a mentor, you could donate to the foundation. You could give us new ideas. We're very, very early in the process. We're a new nonprofit organization. So we accept all feedback and any assistance that you think would help us to be successful in inspiring, educating, and empowering our young people, because that's really what the focus is.
Fantastic. All right, well, we do hope that we have our Belizean students paying attention, or I'm sure their parents are, and they're going to be accessing the website. Of course, the reality is sometimes families do need some help, and it's wonderful for you and your team to step in and to allow for some parents to get access to that help. So best of luck to you and the rest of your team. And there are quite a bit of runners here participating in 5K, 10K, half marathons. I hope they support as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Of course, all the best to you and stay safe.
All right. Thank you. You too.
All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take our final break. And when we come back, we'll have our wrap up. So stay tuned.
Todo beliceño merece tener una conexión de internet de calidad, rápida y confiable en su hogar. Para clases en línea y trabajo desde casa, es la nueva forma de vida. Diginet es el proveedor número 1 de servicio de fibra óptica, impulsando la transición digital de Belice. Y ahora nuestro servicio de Diginet es aún más accesible con nuestro nuevo plan de entrada. Por tiempo limitado, tú y tu familia pueden disfrutar de 20 megabits por segundo por solamente $49 mensuales. No más clases perdidas ni reuniones virtuales interrumpidas. Te está costando mucho tiempo y dinero. Diginet es mejor que cualquier opción de cable o servicio inalámbrico. Visita cualquier Digistore hoy y suscríbete para la conexión más rápida y confiable de Internet para el hogar en Belice. Ven a ver lo que te has estado perdiendo. El mismo servicio de fibra de alta calidad, rápido y confiable, ahora a un precio aún más bajo. Para más información, visita www.livedigi.com/Diginet. Digi, nuestra telecomunicación nacional.
Galenia Hospital, located in Cancun, Mexico's premier tourism destination, is a state-of-the-art healthcare facility that provides highly specialized medical services. We are Quintana Roo's biggest private hospital with board-certified doctors and staff. Some of our services include Cat Lab, Adult Intensive Care Unit, Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, emergency rooms, operating theaters, ambulance services, and more. We are a medically accredited hospital by JCI, Accreditation Canada International, and General Health Council, providing extraordinary care in every specialty, from our cardiology department to our neurology center. We are focused on treating the entire person, body, mind, and spirit. Contact us at medicaltourism@hospitalgalenia.com or visit our website at www.hospitalgalenia.com. Come to Galenia Hospital in Cancun for a truly personal medical care experience.
Why should you wear your mask? To protect myself. My friends. My family and others. I wear my mask because I love my grandparents. With so many reasons to wear a mask, we continue to advise persons to wear a face mask properly, covering both nose and mouth. Together, we can keep Belize COVID-19 safe.
Your life just got a lot less complicated with Belize Bank Contactless MasterCard Debit Card. Introducing our Standard Debit and MasterCard Platinum Debit Cards. Now you can make purchases anywhere MasterCard is accepted with one tap, pay and go. Your contactless card never has to leave your hands, especially in these times. And your card is embedded with multiple layers of security. Platinum card holders get to enjoy extra benefits like price protection, purchase protection, trip inconvenience, and luggage protection, just to name a few. Start enjoying a cashless lifestyle today with the Belize Bank.
In these trying times, Smart is here to lessen the burden. Smart's reduced roaming rates save you while traveling. Calls back home are a low 35 cents per minute when visiting Canada, the US, and Mexico, or pay as low as 50 cents for calls when visiting countries in the Caribbean, Central and South America. For the month of February and March, enjoy an unbelievable low rate of 30 cents per megabyte when roaming with mobile data in Canada, the US, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. Whether you are a business traveler, studying abroad, visiting loved ones, or just traveling for pleasure, Smart's new roaming rates have got you covered. Roaming in China, Europe, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean is as low as the cost of making a local call. It's that low. Smart's roaming coverage continues to grow, so you can also enjoy affordable roaming rates in several destinations across the globe. For more information on rates to other countries, visit our website or call 1090 for more details before you travel. Smart, bringing people together.
And we are back.
We are back. Our first conversation with the Minister of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries as we continue the discussion about the cannabis industry and how we will go about introducing it so that everyone has an equal stake, so to speak. The fact that we have now gotten to the point where legislation, is being reviewed for us to be able to implement the actual systems and to see how that will shape out. I think it's good simply because we now have a clear understanding, at least from listening to the minister explain. I personally have a clear understanding of what it is that they're setting out to do and at what levels the involvement of the average person, the average Belizean in this case, would be able to participate.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think it was necessary to be able to understand more. As he clearly pointed out, this is not going to be an overnight process. This is kind of step 2, and then they move into defining even more clearly the regulations. What I do appreciate, especially after we had the conversation with the professor from Jamaica, that there is an early consideration on how you keep those who are already involved in this industry included as it becomes formalized. So these are all, I believe, helpful in understanding how this process will unfold. But I guess for me, there's an impatience sometimes too. We're seeing other countries get ahead. Was it last week, 2 weeks ago, when there was the intersessional meeting of CARICOM heads, St. Vincent talked about exporting cannabis for medicinal purposes to Germany. And so, you know, some countries are making progress, and this is our progress. We're moving to the point of separating it from the Misuse of Drugs Act.
Well, the thing about it is that, it's like, in this case, every country has its turn based on how quickly and how thoroughly it can move the process along. For me, what stands out is the social equity aspect and being able to really flesh that out and provide the keen details. I think I can appreciate that. So if it kind of prolongs the timeline, I can also appreciate that, you know, everything is being thoroughly, you know, thought out and put together so that it affects everyone in a mutually beneficial way.
All right, and of course, the minister also chimed in there on the crime situation. His main concern seems to be the number of guns that are accessible on our streets. And we do want to reiterate that the Crime Stoppers, they've been trying to get information out saying that essentially, if you do know that there is a gun or ammunition in a household or in a vacant lot, you can utilize Crime Stoppers to be able to make those reports. Of course, those calls are funneled, are filtered internationally, so you can feel safe in being able to put forward that information.
And of course, our second and final conversation was with Dr. Kyla Hichner. She's in Florida, and she was talking about the Promise Foundation International and how that organization is able to help students at the high school level in Belize and at the at the tertiary level outside of Belize to be able to pursue their academic studies.
All right, so it's a great opportunity, parents. If you do need an extra hand with covering the cost of your child's secondary school education, you can go online to the Promise Foundation and you can apply. The scholarships also include a mentor, which is extremely helpful to young people within the school system to offer them some support and guidance. And of course, we always love highlighting our Belizeans who are making marks internationally and giving back.
Yep, there we go.
All right, but that's all the time we have for this morning. If you would like to contact us, send us an email at oye@channel5belize.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Open Your Eyes BZ and on Instagram at OYEBelize. Remember to tune in tomorrow morning at 6:30 when you
open your eyes to start your morning right.
Until then, keep your eyes, your mind,
and your hearts open.
We'll see you soon. Enjoy your day, please.
Open Your Eyes was brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.